She's done nothing with her life, my father said, loudly enough that the couple at the next table turned to look. 14 years of taxpayer money, and what does she have to show for it? It was my brother's wedding rehearsal dinner. The restaurant was a nice one. Linen napkins, candles, and little glass holders, the kind of place where you're supposed to keep your voice down. My father has never been that kind of person. I was sitting 3 seats away from him. I heard every word. My brother Kevin had the decency to look uncomfortable. His fiancée Brooke suddenly found something very interesting to study on the menu. My mother took a slow sip of her wine and said nothing, which was her way of agreeing without having to own it. I'm a federal financial crimes investigator with the Canada Revenue Agency. I've spent 14 years untangling money laundering schemes, offshore shell companies, fraudulent business trusts. I have commendations I've never mentioned to my family because there was no point. To them, I work for the government, which means I work for nobody, which means I've wasted my potential. My potential, in their eyes, was always supposed to look like my brother. Kevin runs the family's property development company, or rather, he manages the public face of it. Sales, relationships, charity galas, photos with city councilors. He's good at all of that. He married well. He owns a house in Westmount that would make your jaw drop. My father built the company from a single duplex purchase in 1987. I grew up hearing that story so many times I could recite it in my sleep. The duplex, the second property, the third, how he worked 20-hour days, how nobody helped him, how he did it all himself. The story grew with every telling, the hours longer, the obstacles larger, the triumph more complete. What I know now, and didn't know then, is that the story had a few chapters he never told us. That night at the rehearsal dinner, I drove home alone to my apartment in Verdun and sat on my kitchen floor for about 20 minutes. I'm not sure why the floor. It just felt right. 14 years. I had spent 14 years doing work that mattered to me, work I was good at, work that occasionally put genuinely dangerous people in prison, and my father could still dismiss it over a breadbasket without blinking. I called my best friend, Sylvie, who talked me off the floor and told me to have a glass of wine and go to sleep. I did both. By morning, I had decided to get through the wedding weekend with my head up and my mouth shut, go back to Ottawa on Sunday, and add this to the long list of things I had decided not to waste grief on. That plan lasted until Friday afternoon. I had arrived early to help Brooke's family set up the reception hall, because that's what I do. I show up and I help, even when nobody notices. I was standing near the venue's back office waiting for someone to bring out the centerpiece boxes when I heard my father's voice around the corner. He was on a phone call, he wasn't whispering. I wasn't trying to listen, then I heard my name. Not a compliment. He was explaining to whoever was on the other end of the call why the numbered company linked to my name shouldn't be a problem, that the filings had been clean, that the CRA contact he'd spoken to had confirmed the account was inactive. I stood very still. My name, a numbered company, CRA filings. I work for the CRA. I know exactly what that means. My father had, at some point in the last several years, registered a numbered company using my personal information. I didn't know when. I didn't know how he'd gotten what he needed. My SIN, my date of birth, likely documents I'd signed for other purposes over the years. Things you hand your parents without thinking because they're your parents. The company had apparently been used to hold and move money in a way that was meant to look like an inactive personal holding, beneath the threshold of automatic review. He hadn't asked me, he had never mentioned it, and he had just told someone on the phone that the CRA contact had confirmed the account was inactive. Except that I am a CRA investigator, and no one from my office had ever contacted me about an account in my name, which meant he was either lying to whoever he was talking to, or someone had been paid to look the other way. I walked to my car, I sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel, and I breathed. Here's what I know how to do. I know how to feel something very large without letting it destroy my ability to think. It's a skill you develop when your job is to look at numbers that represent real crimes and hold it together long enough to build a case. I had been doing it for 14 years. I drove back to the hotel. I opened my laptop. I spent 4 hours that evening pulling every piece of public registry information I could access without triggering a formal inquiry. What I found was worse than I'd expected and also, in a terrible way, clarifying. The numbered company in my name had been incorporated 6 years ago. It had been used as a flow-through entity. Money came in from one of my father's larger holding companies, sat briefly in the numbered account, and moved out to a second company registered in my brother's name. The structure was designed to make the funds look like an inter-family loan, tax-sheltered, below the gift threshold, clean on paper. Except that the original funds, the ones my father's company had sent in, traced back to 2 projects I recognized: a condo development in Brossard and a mixed-use building in Laval, both of which had been flagged in a 2019 internal briefing I had sat in on, flagged for possible construction cost inflation used to reduce taxable profit. I had been in that briefing. I had not been assigned to those files. I had not known at that time that my own name was attached to any of it. I sat with that for a while. There's a particular kind of silence that comes when something you thought was one thing becomes something else entirely. My father hadn't just dismissed me my whole life. He had used me. He had taken my identity, quietly, without asking, without telling me, and made me part of something I had spent my entire career trying to stop. I didn't sleep that night. I drafted a secure message to my supervisor in Ottawa and then deleted it. I drafted it again. I needed to be careful. If I moved too fast, if I flagged this through the wrong channel, I could compromise a broader investigation that might already be ongoing and not be visible to me. I could also, technically, be seen as having a conflict of interest so significant that my own involvement would need to be reviewed. I needed help I could trust. I called a colleague, a woman I'd worked with for 11 years, someone I trusted more than almost anyone I knew professionally. Her name is not important here. What matters is that she picked up at 11:30 at night and listened to everything I said without interrupting, and then she said, "Don't touch anything else tonight. I'll make some calls in the morning." I went to the wedding. I know how that sounds, but I had thought it through, and I understood that walking out would accomplish nothing except alerting my father that something had shifted. If there was already an investigation adjacent to those files, and I had reason to believe there might be, then any sudden change in my behavior could ripple outward in ways I couldn't control. So I put on the dress I bought for the occasion, a blue-gray one that had seemed appropriate when I'd ordered it, and I went. The ceremony was at a heritage church in Outremont. Stained glass, stone floors, the kind of place that made everything feel significant whether it was or not. Kevin looked nervous in the good way. Brooke was beautiful and seemed genuinely happy, which made me sad for a moment because she didn't know what I knew, and I didn't know yet what any of it would mean for the life she was about to step into. My father walked me down the side aisle to my seat, his hand on my arm, smiling at people he recognized in the pews. He leaned toward me and said, quietly, "You look nice." I said thank you. My voice sounded normal. I don't know how. At the reception, I drank water and watched him work the room. He was good at it. Always had been. Handshakes, backslaps, a word for everyone, the laugh that came easily and meant nothing. I had admired it once. I had wanted it once, when I was young enough to think that being liked by a room was the same thing as being worth something. My mother found me near the end of the cocktail hour. She said she hoped I was having a good time, and then she said, because she couldn't stop herself, "Your father worries about you, you know. He just wants to see you settled." I looked at her for a moment. I thought about all the things I could say. "I know," I said. 2 weeks later, my colleague called me from a blocked number and told me that the files had been escalated. A formal investigation had been opened. It was not assigned to me, appropriately given my position, but I had been interviewed as a witness, and my signed statement had confirmed that I had no knowledge of the numbered company, had not authorized its use, and had discovered its existence inadvertently. My cooperation had been noted. My father's lawyer contacted me 4 days after that. He told me my father wanted to speak with me. I told him I had nothing to say outside of an official proceeding. The investigation took 14 months. I know some of what happened during that time and not all of it. I was deliberately kept at arm's length from the active file, which was the right call and which I respected even when it was frustrating. What I can tell you is that at the end of it, my father was assessed for back taxes and penalties totaling just over $2.3 million. Two of his holding companies were dissolved. The numbered company in my name was formally unwound, and a legal notice was filed confirming that I had been a victim of identity misuse, not a participant. Kevin was not charged. He was interviewed extensively. Whether he understood what the structure actually was, or whether my father had simply told him it was a legitimate tax arrangement and he had not asked the questions he should have asked, I genuinely don't know. I have thought about it a lot. Kevin called me once, in the middle of all of it, and left a voicemail that I still have saved on my phone. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't know. He said he understood if I didn't believe him. His voice sounded like he'd been crying. I haven't called him back yet. I'm not sure that's the right word, yet. It might just be true that I haven't decided what I want to say. My mother called me 3 times in the 6 weeks after the assessment was issued. The first call I didn't answer. The second time she left a message saying that she hoped I understood that what my father did had nothing to do with how they felt about me, and that families went through difficult things and came out the other side. The third time she called, I picked up. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. I told her that I was actually genuinely fine, that I was good at my job, that I had done everything correctly, that my name had been cleared and my record was clean and I had nothing to be ashamed of. I told her that what I was less sure about was whether I could keep walking into rooms where I was treated like a disappointment by someone who had quietly used my identity to hide money for 6 years. She was quiet for a while, then she said he didn't think it would affect you. That's not really the point, I said. I know, she said, and she sounded for the first time in a long time like she actually did. I don't have a clean ending for you. I know that's what these stories are supposed to have, the moment where the dad staggers, where the room goes silent, where everyone finally sees. And there was a moment like that, I suppose. There was a day when my father sat across from an investigator in a government office and had to explain himself, and I know from what my colleague told me afterward that he had not been comfortable, that his lawyer had done most of the talking, that he had aged visibly in the months the case had been open. But I wasn't in that room. I didn't need to be. What I have instead is this. I am 34 years old. I own my apartment. Bought it myself, 3 years ago, small down payment, no help from anyone. I am good at a job that I chose because it mattered to me, not because it would impress anyone at a dinner party. I have a life that is genuinely mine, built from the inside out without anyone else's money or approval holding it up. My father used my name to build something. He had to watch it come apart. I just kept building. I keep thinking about that moment on the kitchen floor, not with embarrassment anymore, just with a kind of quiet recognition. That floor was the lowest I'd felt in years, and I didn't know yet that everything was about to get much harder before it got better. But looking back, something in me held. I didn't make a scene at the rehearsal dinner. I didn't confront my father in the parking lot. I didn't blow up my brother's wedding weekend with what I knew. Not because I was weak, but because I understood, somewhere in my gut, before I even had words for it, that acting from hurt was not the same as acting from principle. That distinction matters. It's the one I've built my whole career on, actually. When you investigate financial crimes, you learn very quickly that the people who get caught are usually the ones who believe the rules didn't apply to them, not because they were stupid. Often, they were brilliant. They just decided at some point that their needs were larger than their integrity, and they made one small compromise and then another, and then they built an entire structure on top of those compromises and called it success. My father is one of the smartest people I know. He built something real from nothing, and then he decided, somewhere along the way, that protecting what he'd built was more important than how he protected it. That's not a failure of intelligence. It's a failure of character, and no amount of intelligence can compensate for it in the long run. I think about what it took to get through those 14 months, not the investigation itself. That was other people's work, and they did it well. I mean what it took on my end. To go into the office every day knowing there was an open file adjacent to my own name and not be able to touch it. To answer questions honestly, in full, even when the honest answers were painful and complicated. To trust a process I believed in, even when it was slow and even when it was costing me things I hadn't expected to lose. The easy family dinners, the reflexive belonging, the story I told myself about who my father was, that took something. I don't have a better word for it than steadiness. The kind that isn't about being unafraid. It's about doing the next right thing when you are afraid, when you are tired, when the outcome isn't certain. What I didn't expect was how clear things became on the other side. Not happy exactly, but clear. When you've had to account for yourself, really account for yourself, in writing, to people whose job is to determine whether you knew, you stop being fuzzy about who you are. I know what I did and didn't do. I know the choices I made and why I made them. That kind of clarity is not something anyone can take from you, and it turns out it's worth more than I realized when I was younger and still hoping my father would finally see me as enough. He used my name. He had to watch what he built come apart because of it. I just kept building,